I was just a sponge. Every time something would come up and say, hey, somebody needs to do this, I would raise my hand. I'll go do it. I'll go do it. Let me take that on, even if I had no clue what I was doing.
Welcome to The Lead Sponsor, where we bring you exclusive access to the most successful and sought-after real estate syndication sponsors in the industry. Join us as we dive deep into the stories, strategies, struggles, and secrets of these elite professionals who are changing the game in commercial real estate investing. Whether you're an active sponsor looking to take your business to the next level, or a passive investor looking for the best operators in the country, the Lead Sponsor podcast is for you.
Hey guys, David Robinson here. Welcome to the Lead Sponsor podcast. Thanks for joining us for another episode. Excited about our guest this week. I've got Andrew Young with me from NorthRock Companies. Andrew is the managing partner at NorthRock and brings significant experience in value-add acquisitions, redevelopment, and finance. And prior to joining NorthRock, Andrew worked at Sundance Bay as a senior development manager and later as head of acquisitions, where he helped grow the business from inception to over $400 million in value-add multifamily real estate throughout the country. And Andrew holds a Bachelor's of Science in Finance from Brigham Young University. And as far as NorthRock is concerned, NorthRock has acquired at least 21 projects totaling 1.3 billion in acquisition value. So a substantial company that Andrew's been a significant part of. So Andrew, that's a very brief bio, but I'd love for you to give our listeners a little bit more about yourself and in particular NorthRock, what you guys are all about, what you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely, David. Thanks for having me. It's been fun to get to know you a little bit and would love to chat about NorthRock. So NorthRock was started by myself as well as a few partners. We joined forces together back in December of 2018, really started rolling in January of 2019. And we wanted to start NorthRock with the vision of acquiring value-add multifamily assets across the country. I was at a prior firm and my partners were doing development at the time. And so we really brought to bear our relationships. So I founded NorthRock just a little over 4 years ago now, just eclipsed our 4-year mark. And we acquire typically larger value-add assets, anywhere from 200 units and above, predominantly in the Southwest and the Southeast, where we look for value-add through renovations, through operational expense reduction, through professional management expertise, etc. So that was really our vision, coming together, acquiring these types of assets, and then growing a platform across the United States.
And I mentioned, roughly 21 projects, about 1.3 billion in acquisition value. Did I have that right? That may be a little bit old bio, but I just want to check and make sure I had that right.
Yeah, no, that's correct. Actually, it's even a little forward-looking. So we've acquired technically 20. We have our 21st deal under contract at the moment, which will put us at the 1.3. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So no small feat, right? I mean, you guys got started, really got headed in the right direction in 2019. And, you've acquired, going on $1.3 billion in value over just a handful of years. That's not, I wouldn't say that's usual. And so I'm excited to hear about sort of this journey and this process that you guys have been on. At a high level, can you give us just a brief explanation of how NorthRock is structured? Like any key principles that are involved, key employees that are involved, numbers, where you guys are located and based out of, that type of stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. So when we started the firm, it was really was me in an office with a laptop, and I had a couple partners who were running a different business at the time that really we joined forces. They brought to bear relationships on the equity side, advisory side, management side, and then I brought the kind of execution on the acquisition, the asset management, and broker relationship side. Can't say enough about the guys I'm partnered with. They have absolutely added fuel to this fire and allowed us to do what we've been able to do. But it's grown from me and those partners up to where we now have 14 full-time employees. We do have a few interns as well that are part-time. So I think our total headcount at the moment is 18. But we're located in Draper, Utah. For those of you in Utah, we're in the Hoops Vision building right off the I-15 on the top floor there. And it's been a lot of fun. We used to be bumming office space off of one of our sister companies, and we were quickly growing and outwore our welcome there as we quickly sort of taking over the kitchen and the ping pong table. And so they kicked us out, made us grow up a little bit, so we got our own office space there in Draper. As far as the way we're structured as an LLC and as partnership, and typically when we do our deals, we, up to this point, have done just JV deals where we will syndicate the equity, but predominantly we have the same investor network that my partners have been using for decades, and bringing that to bear in these deals and in these relationships where we will really raise equity on a per deal basis. And that's how we've done all 20 to date.
Love it. And as far as your typical project, I know you mentioned, value add 200 units or above, generally speaking, in the Southwest, Southeast. Any additional color that you can add to what you're looking for in an ideal acquisition?
Yeah. Well, we try to cast a fairly wide net. But first, how we do that is we're a very data-centric shop. And so rather than finding a deal and then trying to figure out, or finding an asset and then trying to figure out why that asset makes sense or why that location makes sense, we kind of flip that on its head. And we actually do a nationwide data analysis project for every market. And then we actually take every MSA and split that up into different submarkets. So take Phoenix, for example, or we'll take Salt Lake, since that's where we're both located. Salt Lake has about 13 different submarkets within it. And as we know, Holiday is very different than Rose Park, or Sugar House is very different than Draper and Sandy. And so what we do is we do that across the country. So hundreds and hundreds of submarkets, and we actually start with a big wide funnel, and we analyze all those markets and then try to drill down into the, not just MSAs, but the submarkets that we like. And that allows us to pinpoint and be very direct for where we want to focus our acquisition attention. Because if you're just looking at everything, you can go a mile wide, but only an inch deep. And that's what allows us to look across the country in markets and get very aggressive when we know we like it. So once we find the market that we like, then we start creating relationships with brokers that we know locally there. And then once we find those, we then tell them the criteria for the assets we like. And I think that's really getting to your main question. And usually it's 200 units and above up to this point. And it's interesting, our life cycle to this point has been one thing, but as we all know, the market is shifting and changing quite rapidly under our feet at the moment. And so what we've done over the last 4 years may not necessarily pivot, but may expand and or contract for the next 4 years. But what we've been doing is anything 1980s and newer, wanting to focus predominantly on Class A, A-, B+ type assets, knowing that we were, kind of we were at the, 10 years into a bull market run, and wanting to hold on to good, solid quality assets in case there was some sort of a downturn, which we're seeing at the moment. So really it's kind of 1980s and newer. We like to have certain median incomes above a certain level. We like to be in markets that have a good, strong, stable economy. We will go into what others would classify as tertiary markets, as long as there is an economic viable story surrounding why that market may no longer be tertiary 10 years from now. So yeah, that's really our criteria.
And as far as general business plan on these deals, are you looking long-term holds? Are you looking more, hey, we're adding value and then we're looking to exit? Are you looking to refinance and hold long-term? What does that look like for you, generally speaking?
Yeah, I think our goal and mission is always to um, two things: maximize investor return. But what's interesting is return can be looked at as predominantly just percentage base and flipping assets, or return can be looked at on like an equity multiple base and or wealth creation. And I would say a predominant amount of our investors are more focused on wealth creation, long-term hold, cash on cash returns. And so we typically, not in all cases, but typically underwrite deals anywhere from a 7 to 10 year hold, expecting to hang on to them longer term. We're trying to generate a portfolio. We're not necessarily trying to just buy and quick flip to extract really high IRRs. So yeah, our goal is to build a portfolio long term.
And you mentioned your typical structure as a joint venture deal, but you're also syndicating the equity. And I just want to make sure I understand fully sort of your business model. Do you operate your own deals, or do you partner with other operators that are entrenched in the local market that will be operating the deal, and you bring expertise from an analysis from an equity perspective? Maybe just shed some light on how that structure. Make sure I understand it completely.
Sure. Yeah. So really the different levels of a deal are I view kind of the GP and LP kind of at the top as the investor base, with the LPs being more passive, the GP being the active portion. Then there's the asset management, which sits on top of, therefore, property management. So whenever we go into a market, we will hire third-party property management companies that have a grasp and an understanding of that local economy, have resources such as people. Labor is very tough these days, and so we want to really loop into those resources that they have there, boots on the ground. However, that asset management, the next level above that, is so crucial. And so we have a whole asset management team in-house that is on weekly phone calls, at least quarterly, if not monthly, site visits. We're constantly getting reports, analyzing those, and wanting to make sure that we are retooling the direction we're headed to make sure that we are executing on the original business plan we told our investors. So that's on the asset management side. If our business plan includes renovations, which I would say 9 times out of 10 it does, we also have a renovation department within our team that we oversee renovations. We will typically work with small or medium-sized contractors in the local market, and then we will asset manage them or construction manage the project from afar. And that requires a lot of travel, but we like to have that in-house.
Yeah, love it. Okay, thanks for breaking that down. I appreciate it. Yeah. Well, look, that's a great overview of NorthRock and what you guys are focused on, what you've done in the past, and how you guys are structured. Let's back up and let's talk about your own personal journey. A lot of our listeners are inspired by our guests and the journey that they've been on and how they got to where they're at today. And so I want to back up. Let's maybe start from your last formal education and bring us forward and let us know how this all played out for you.
Sure. Well, David, if it's okay, I might... I think my trajectory, I guess, and that doesn't mean it was slow or steep or whatever, but it has been a little bit different than I think others have. And so if you're okay, I might start with my first formal education. So I actually went to college. I graduated high school early. I've always enjoyed school. I went to college for a year and loved the education, but didn't like the college experience that I had. So I actually dropped out of college after my first year. And I moved to Arizona as a teenager and started my own real estate company, fixing and flipping homes in Arizona. And which might sound cool or exciting or fun. I mean, it was just, drudgery, candidly, struggling to find these deals at a young age. I had no idea what I was doing. But candidly, it was the best education I could have given myself, because I learned from the school of hard knocks. It went well for about a year, but then the Great Recession happened when I was 19, and the bottom of the world fell out in Arizona, and I went kind of without making any money for the span of about a year and a half. And in that span, I was trying to figure things out, but I learned more about what I didn't know through that process. And, I was over there calculating, okay, how many more months do I have before I run out of money, and how much longer can I live on the meager means that I had? And then I had a conversation with somebody that really changed, I think, my path. And it led me back to school. And one of the big things I like to share is he gave me the example of the San Francisco bridge collapse. And he said, imagine when that San Francisco bridge collapsed, if your grandmother was trapped under that bridge in the rubble, but then right next to her was a linebacker from the San Francisco 49ers. And he said, if it was going to take you 10 hours to dig out your grandmother, who you love and you care about, and that is your main focus, right? However, you could turn around, and if you diverted your attention away from what you wanted, and you could dig out this linebacker who's obviously strong, very capable, and it only took you an hour. If you diverted your attention, focused there, pulled them out, and then they could be a tool for you and help you get your grandmother out faster than you would have on your own, would you do that? And a light bulb clicked for me. And so whereas I thought, hey, I'm going to drop out of school and make my own way, I don't need school to do this, that clicked for me, and I went back to school, and I fought through community college, finished my associates, and then I transferred to Arizona State, actually, there in Tempe for a year, and then transferred to BYU in Provo, and finished up my junior and senior year there in Provo. And then while I was there, I was actually transferring, looking for an internship, and I found an internship with a company who was called Sundance Capital Group at the time. They're now called Sundance Bay, but they were fixing and flipping homes in Arizona. And so there was a unique overlap there, and they brought me on as an intern, but quickly realized I knew a little bit more about that process than your typical intern does. And so they asked me to stay on full time. So they hired me when I was a junior in college. So I would work 50 hours a week for them. I structured all my classes very early in the morning. I'd take all my classes, and then I'd work for them in the afternoon and the evening. And then I had all my classes Monday through Thursday, and I would travel Friday and Saturday. I had a young family. I was married with 2 kids, 2.5 kids, actually, one on the way. And so just kind of slogged through my junior and senior year, but learned a ton, helped them grow. We were buying about 20 houses a month, helped them, start a debt fund, helped them start multiple companies. And through that, we were kind of just throwing things against the wall to see what stuck, candidly. We started companies, shuttered companies, some went well, and kind of out of all that excitement, we came out the other end with a single family business that we had the opportunity. We got a phone call from somebody saying, hey, there's a multifamily deal actually in Wisconsin, of all places, where somebody's foreclosing, and we want you to come in and take a look. And it was a friend of a friend. So we kind of did that, raised some money, light bulb went on saying, hey, it's a lot easier to do, 80 units under one roof rather than 80 different roofs in the single family realm. And so we completely sold out of everything on the single family side, shifted, pivoted. And at that time, I was just an employee. I was not a partner. I was not an equity stakeholder in that company. But I was given a lot of autonomy, and I was the second employee at the company. And so, when you're young and early, you're wearing a lot of hats, and you do a lot of different things, and you're involved in a lot of things at a higher level than you typically would be. And so that enabled me to learn very quickly. And I think one of the big reasons for, I don't know if you call it success, but for my growth was I was just a sponge. Every time something would come up and say, hey, somebody needs to do this, I would raise my hand. I'll go do it. I'll go do it. Let me take that on, even if I had no clue what I was doing. And that helped me grow very, very quickly. And so I helped them. I grew through the ranks with them and stayed with them for about 9 years. Started off on, acquisitions, dispositions, asset management, and then hyper focused on the development management, the execution side of the business, and then transitioned over to the acquisition side, and wound up being head of acquisitions. Helped them grow to about $450 million of assets under management. And then at that point, Great guys, great team. I think we just had a slightly different vision of what the future was going to hold, and my growth trajectory, I think, superseded what the available options were for me at the firm. They were a bit top heavy there, and so there wasn't really too much elbow room there at the top. And so I moved on and was looking to start my own development company and or start my own acquisition firm. I was also looking at a few other larger corporate entities that I wasn't overly excited about. It's just not my culture. But then I was able to be introduced to a few of these partners that I have now that were doing other businesses. They have a debt fund. They have a large general contracting firm there in Utah called Rimrock Construction. They have a development arm, and we're wanting to get into the acquisition space. And so it was kind of a perfect marriage between us, and started the company and haven't looked back. So that's kind of the intro.
Well, what a great story. And I think will resonate with a lot of our younger listeners out there that are in a time in the market where, things have been turned on its head, and there's probably a lot of question whether or not they're headed down the right path if they're just getting started. And to hear your story about, having a little bit of a false start in the space, and then having that great analogy told to you by a mentor about diverting your attention to the linebacker and digging them out so that you could actually have more progress moving forward. And what a cool story. So thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit more about the formation of NorthRock and the partnership and how that all came together. You glossed over that a little bit, but I know that that's helpful to a lot of our listeners that may be doing deals as joint ventures, but they would really like to form a more legitimate business entity and firm and move together, in a formal fashion versus, just piecemeal joint ventures together per deal. If you can, maybe shed a little bit more detail on how those relationships came to be, how you found each other, and then what was the strategy moving forward when you guys decided, hey, this is something that we could push forward on.
Yeah. So maybe starting with how we found each other, thinking back on it, it really just comes down to relationships. And I think the biggest thing I can tell your listeners is it's all about not burning bridges, and it's about creating honest, genuine, mutually beneficial relationships. And I can say that while I was doing deals at my prior firm, while I was out in markets talking with people, etc., I always made sure to treat people with respect and with kindness, and then not even just that, but actually try to create a genuine friendship and relationship with people. And at the end of the day, people do business with people they like. And I had been able to create some friends with others in the industry. And so when I was starting to have the thought process of doing my own business, I shared that with a handful of individuals that had, again, a network. So I shared with my network, they shared with their network, and really it's all about, you hear the old adage, it's not about what you know, it's who you know. And I think that those people were willing to recommend me to others because of the relationship they had built. It wasn't all of a sudden in that moment they were touting my name and saying, you should look at this guy and pair me together. It was the years of experience we had prior that built that. And so there was a relationship that I had, and through a familial relationship of his who had a friend. So it was kind of this daisy chain. The partners that I have now had mentioned that they were looking to start an acquisition vertical. And so through multiple kind of strings in that relationship, they paired us together on a phone call. Candidly, at the beginning, I was pretty stuck on doing my own development company. And so I was a little bit, not leery, but just kind of like, hey, I'm already doing this, I'll entertain the phone call. But then the more conversations we had, the more I realized what an excellent opportunity it was. And I think sometimes too, I remember back when I was younger, I used to think I needed to own 100% of something. And I do not own 100% of NorthRock. I have partners. And so I'm just think about it again as I'm okay owning a smaller slice of something larger versus 100% of nothing. And so, we talked through it. The relationships happened. We had multiple lunches, phone interviews, and discussions over the course of probably about 5 to 6 months. And finally, it was, I liked them, and I was interviewing them just as much as they were interviewing me, to make sure once you start a partnership, it's almost like a business marriage. It's very easy to enter into, very difficult to get out of. And so you want to make sure that the people you're doing business with are those that one of my partners always uses the analogy, when things get tough, is this somebody you want in the foxhole next to you? Is it somebody that you trust when bullets are flying? Is it somebody that you can rely on who can have your back? And these guys absolutely fit that bill. I couldn't ask for better partners. And they're just absolutely rock solid, good guys. So once we shook hands and created that relationship, we each brought to bear different skills and talents. And I think that's one thing for your listeners is, there has to be both. There has to be the trust and the relationship, but then there also has to be a yin and a yang in your values, because when you're starting a company, a lot of times at the beginning, you're not making any money. A lot of times you're actually losing money, and you're having to fund that out of your own pocket. And that's what I think stops a lot of people. Is it's scary. I quit my job. I got to go do this, and I might, drastically reduce my income, or actually have to fork over some money to keep this afloat. But if you have that yin and yang relationship, then you know that you're synergistically moving forward in the right direction. You don't have two people trying to drive the bus at the same time. So it was just candidly a perfect fit for us. I have my wife to thank for that, actually. I remember, she drove me, she was like, well, drive me by the office. Let me just see the outside of it. And I was hemming and hawing, and I don't know, I think I'm going to go this other direction. We drove by it, and she just saw the building, heard the story, and goes, you got to do it. It's exactly right. I just feel it. It's what you got to do. And being the, dumb husband that I am, it still took me about 30 days beyond that to finally make the decision. And when I finally came to her and was like, look, this is what we're going to do, she was like, I knew it. I was just waiting for you to come around. So another thing out there to your listeners, just listen to your wife. Things will go better.
There you go. So, well, yeah. Thanks for shedding some detail on how that partnership came to be. I'm curious, you mentioned the importance of having complementary skill sets, and you mentioned that they had experience in construction, so they already had a construction entity, construction company that was active in the market. Then you also mentioned another aspect of the debt fund. Maybe just shed some light on each of the partners' roles and responsibilities and sort of vision of how you guys all integrated.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to answer that in a couple of ways too. I think for your individuals personally and what they can be doing, and then also looking for in a partnership. So while my partners do own a large third-party general contracting company, and I think as you would well know, as others who are trying to do this, sometimes hiring a large third-party general contractor is just too expensive for doing carpet and turn paints and putting in new appliances, right? And so we actually haven't used the general contracting arm once. And so while they have that expertise, I think what benefited it is just simply their knowledge and understanding of it. But my partners, their understanding and value that they've really brought, which is tremendous, is a lot of capital, their capital relationships and investor network. But even more so, they've started north of about 50 businesses. And so helping them, or them helping me and us together, just understanding and going through the ebbs and the flows at the beginning stages of a company, which can be daunting and can be frustrating, scary. If they had just done it before. And so there was this confidence that I think I tried to bring, but they definitely had, where it was just like, hey, this is the normal flows. We'll get through this. And that was an excellent guidepost for me to have a kind of a rock of a mentality like that. But on a personal side, I think what I did at Sundance, or my prior firm, jumping around and tackling wearing all the different hats, as I mentioned before, really I had touched and seen and done every aspect of the business. So I wasn't just an acquisition guy, or I wasn't just an asset manager. And not saying either one of those in and of itself is not good enough, but I was able to see the entire life cycle from start to finish: acquisitions, closing, investor relations, raising capital, financing, asset management, dealing with banks and dealing with equity investors, and then also disposition. So I had seen from kind of soup to nuts the entire process. And not just seen it, not just touched it. I had actually held those roles for multiple years within the organization. There's a difference on just going on an asset management or a renovation trip with a guy than actually having the responsibility fall on you and you doing that for 2 to 3 years on your own. And so I actually tell our acquisition guys at our team now, there's no better experience on being an acquisition guy than to go be an asset manager, because you can put whatever you want into a pro forma. It's really easy to make a couple keystrokes in Excel and make a deal pencil, but the actual execution and being able to take what's in that pro forma and make that happen in reality is a very different story and very different skill set. And then also on the flip side, what makes an asset manager really, really good is spending time in the acquisition shoes. The way you look at that's exactly why you can't turn a property over to a property management company and just say, hey, go execute this business plan, because it's a different school of thought. It's a different way, or different lens, or a different paradigm in which people view what needs to happen in order to get from point A to point B. And we talk about this a lot, and I'll give a very simple, this business is, people can make it complex, but at the baseline, it can be very simple. A lot of our investors will say, why don't you just try and keep a property 100% occupied? And if you ask a property management company, a lot of them will say, well, yeah, I just want to fill it up. I want to get 100% occupied. You would think the community manager there, it makes their job a lot easier. They don't have turnover. They don't have to lease as many units. They can just kind of sit back and relax. Well, that's not in the best interest of your investors or you. And so we actually never want our properties to be at 100% occupied, because that means you're not maximizing value. And so inherently there is a disconnect between what's incentivizing for the property manager and what's incentivizing for you as the owner. And so there just is a different way to look at things. So I would recommend to your viewers or listeners, try to take responsibilities and roles in multiple different positions within an organization. Or even if you're just trying to do syndications, don't just hire a contractor and say, go out there and do it, and kind of put blinders on and just hope that they do it. Go out there, swing a hammer yourself, bring in the boxes, put together the cabinets, rip up the flooring. I've done all of that. I've slept in my units. I've put together boxes in Arizona during the summer with no AC. We could talk about some of those things. That'd be a fun conversation. But go do the work and see it, because once you do it and you understand, if I put in X, I get Y. And once you truly understand what that means, it'll help you on the other side of the business. And so candidly, coming full circle on your question, what I brought to bear was really all of the execution side, and my partners brought to bear kind of the corporate business strengths and structuring, as well as capital relationships.
Yeah, love it. So we've got to talk about what the last 3 years have looked like, because it's a pretty significant growth trajectory, right? 1.3 billion roughly in acquisition value doesn't just happen naturally.
Sure.
How did things get started? So the business forms, you decide, hey, we're going to go and we're going to attack this thing. Was the business plan out the gate what it is today, or did that change for you early on?
Yeah, no, luckily the business plan is exactly what we're doing now. And we had a vision. I had a vision to really create a company like we have today. It's grown faster than I anticipated, David, for sure. I still remember we sat around as a partnership team and said, we think we can raise, if I bring my equity relationships to bear and everybody kind of throws their people in the middle of the table with names and things, we thought we could raise $50 million, not per deal, but just in total. And to date, we've raised almost $450 million. So we're approaching $500 million in actual equity raised. And it's been humbling. It's been phenomenal. It's been exciting. It's been fun. But most importantly, it has been quite the unique experience to see people's trust and faith in us and the relationships my partners have built for so many years. And we take that very, very seriously. I can tell you that's the one thing as an owner and doing these deals, you absolutely will lose sleep at night. And if you don't, there's a problem with that. I truly believe that, because to know that you've had people essentially invest in you, there is a lot of trust, and there is an absolute immense amount of responsibility and fiduciary responsibility that comes with that. So when we started the business, we had the idea to go buy value add deals just like this. And I remember the first one, we wanted to raise like $5 or $6 million of equity. The first deal I found required us to raise 16 million of equity. So brought that, but sometimes, as we all know, you can't be beggars and choosers. When a deal comes and it's the right one, you got to kind of just grab the bull by the horns and take it. And that was tough. The first one's the hardest. Just like anything, first deal, first new market, first whatever. I got on a bunch of buyer interview phone calls, which I'm sure you've been on, and they're like, okay, well, tell us about your company. How many deals do you have? And well, we have 0, but we'll do a really good job, I promise, and it's a lot of this type of please, please, please let us do this because I know we can perform. But that's where my prior relationships with brokers really came to bear. I had done deals with some of these brokers before in a prior life. And yes, this was under a new flag, but recognizing this was the same Andrew Young, it was the same relationship, the same guy on the other end of the phone call who would get done what he says he's going to get done. And I'm not going to say it made it easy. We got second place about 9 times before we won our first deal. And so, but we got our first deal, which was Mandalay Villas in Atlanta, Georgia. And from there, we got our second deal from that same brokerage network. And then that just started the snowball effect downhill. Was not easy. None of these deals have been easy. Ask anybody buying apartments over the last 3 years. It was a very competitive, still is today, even though the market's shifting, very competitive space. And so we had to be creative. But I guess having our foot on the gas on the acquisition side, and using our data-centric knowledge, I think allowed us to be a little bit more specific on the markets and deals we wanted to get into. We are not the most aggressive shop out there. We will not underwrite to crazy returns. So I still want to be able to have save face when you're sitting across from an investor trying to raise capital. And you got to make sure to execute on what you say you're going to do. And so that finding that balance between, if something goes wrong, you need to be able to sit back and look at your underwriting metrics and say, I still stand behind those today, even though I was wrong, but if we were putting 6, 7, 8% rent growth in there, I wouldn't be able to do that. Even though that was achieved, I wouldn't be able to, if something had gone wrong, been like, hey, we underwrote 10% rent growth in Arizona. That's crazy, you know? So it's tough. I think it was putting one foot in front of the other. It was a candid grind on every day, trying to make a concerted effort to build those relationships, and then not taking no for an answer. I have one deal where we got all the way to the end. It's one of our best deals in our portfolio, since Savannah, Georgia. We were buying it from the original developer, and they awarded us the deal. It was during COVID, so there was a lot of this craziness going on. They awarded us the deal verbally. We started negotiating PSA. We got to about the sixth turn of the PSA. We signed it, sent it back to them. They were going to sign it and send it back, and we were starting to move forward. We get a phone call in the afternoon. They said, never mind, we're not selling the deal. And they got cold feet. And it was a great deal, and we knew we wanted it. And so I didn't take no for an answer. So I booked a plane flight. I hopped on a plane the following morning and showed up on their doorstep and resurrected the deal, and we put it back under contract. And I think they saw that as a hey, this guy won't let this fail kind of attitude. And that was, you know, a $55 million deal in Savannah, and that's been one of the best ones in our portfolio. So I think there was a lot of that mentality just through this process, and fighting tooth and nail to win, but not at the cost of bad metrics or bad underwriting. It's just I'm a very competitive person and want to grow. And when I usually set my sights on a goal, you know, just do whatever you can to achieve it. So
we've talked a lot about what's gone on in the past. Let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about, you know, what you see in the market moving forward. You've built up a, you know, substantial portfolio. You could probably just sit back and enjoy what you've built at this point, continue to massage those deals and maximize their performance. What do you see on the horizon for NorthRock? What are you guys focused on moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. And some of this is fairly new and fresh, and obviously with things changing in the market, we are acquiring our 21st asset right now. It's a $75 million deal in Charlotte, North Carolina. The reason we're acquiring that one is because it was an off-market transaction with a group that we got great debt. It's assumable debt at 2.5% interest. And so there's this immediate arbitrage on where you can get new debt today versus where we could get that, but we're also buying it at today's cap rate. So it's a unique deal. I say we're saying no to 99% of deals right now, but that one just happened to fit all the right boxes. We know that 2023 is going to be a fairly meager year on purpose for us. We're using this time to prime the pump, get ready with equity relationships, and fine tuning a lot of processes internally. We've grown quickly, and we are trying to fine tune how we do things and the way our machinery internally, I guess you could call it, runs, so that, because we believe that this is another great opportunity to go and acquire. I don't believe it's going to be as detrimental as 2008, 2010 was, but even if it's half of that, it still presents a wonderful buying opportunity coming out of this downturn. And so we are getting ready that in 2024, I think we'll probably buy somewhere 200 to 250 million this year. Our best year ever is 410 million. But I think we'll probably buy 200 to 250 this year. But our goal in 2024, or whenever this market hits the bottom, is to go out and almost double that. So we want to buy between 700 and $1 billion a year for the next 2 to 3 years coming out of this downturn. So our goal is about 700, and then 850, and then $1 billion in those subsequent years. And so our main trunk of what we do right now is always going to be our main vertical. Our goal is to get to about 30,000 units. Right now we're just under 6,000, so we still have a long ways to go. and our growth trajectory needs to be steep in order to accomplish that. In order to do that, we are starting to branch into more institutional type equity relationships, where we would bring to bear people who can write larger checks, not to replace our current investor network. We'll never replace our current investor network. They're incredible. It's simply to augment and allow us to scale up to that next level. And then, so twofold. One, it's new and additional equity relationships to fuel that growth. And then we're also starting, as we now have this platform. I mentioned to you before, when I was at the prior firm, we kind of did a lot of different businesses all at the same time, and mile wide, inch deep, right? And there were some that worked and some that didn't. And some of the reason for that was because we couldn't put enough attention on some of those businesses, because capital was strapped, time was strapped, our mental capacity was just stretched. But now, so when I started NorthRock, I wanted to create a solid enough foundation, solid enough people, solid enough capital relationships to where then from that solid foundation, we could start to build horizontally. And we're starting to do that now, because we believe that this cap rate expansion that we're seeing and really value dilution is not just happening in single family. It's not just happening in multifamily. It's happening in any real estate asset class. I mean, you look at what's happening in the retail sector, the office sector. I mean, you read about some of the big, large mega funds are starting to foreclose and default on some loans. So there's a lot of pain being happening out there. And so we start looking at, okay, what other verticals do we want to be in? And one of those is we're starting to actually look into additional verticals where we can go horizontal. So internally, we've made the decision to do a couple things. One is, before we were only doing 200 units and above. And right now, anything under 200 units, we just simply hit delete. So I say we've been stepping over $20 bills to pick up $100 bills, right? And so what we're doing is we're going to build out a team at NorthRock to start picking up some of those $20 bills along the way. So we're going to start trying to do about $200 million a year in 50 to 199 unit deals. And then also, we are starting another vertical in the self-storage / flex industrial space, where we want to do about $200 million a year there. So my goal is 5 years from now, our main tree trunk of a business, the 200 units and above multifamily, will be at probably 20,000 units. And then also have a $1 billion self-storage business, and then have another $1 billion acquisition business in what I call the smaller multifamily space. So that's really the next 5-year trajectory for NorthRock.
Man, love it. Love the vision. Love hearing about the game plan, and, taking what you guys have built in the last 3-4 years and really taking it to a whole nother level, but also recognizing where we're at in the market, using this time to really shore up the foundation of what you've built so that you can, take things to a whole nother level moving forward. Well, look, I could keep us going for a lot longer here, but I want to be respectful of your time and start winding down. Before I let you go, what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you and learn more about what you guys have going on over there at NorthRock?
LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. Not too hard to find there. I don't know what my URL is or anything, but or you can just email me. It's ayoung@northrockco.com. So pretty easy to find, and to all of your listeners, as well as the people that work at NorthRock, as they'll attest to, we have a very flat organization, open door policy. So anybody can walk into my office at any time. We sit down and chat. So I'll open that up to your listeners, that any questions, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'm happy to schedule a time to get on the phone and chat.
Well, for all of you that are listening, if you've enjoyed the conversation with Andrew today, go down into the show notes right now and click on one of those links to connect with Andrew or his team. You can find him on LinkedIn, his email, and then also their website there. So go ahead and click on one of those links and connect with Andrew there. Andrew, again, an honor to have you on the show. Thank you for sharing your journey. What a cool story to sort of have this false start in the space, and having to, have a mentor recalibrate your thinking about how to move forward and accomplish your goals. And then to really grind out as an employee. There's so many that are getting into the space that really want to just go and start their thing right out the gate. And you spent time really learning the ins and outs of every bit of this industry before you decided to go off on your own. And it sounds like that was just a valuable aspect of you being able to not only bring value to partners that had complementary assets to bring to the table, but also to really go and execute on the vision that you had for the company. And so what a cool story to be able to accomplish what you guys have in such a short period of time, really getting, hitting the ground running in 2019, acquiring over $1 billion in the last handful of years. What a great story. Excited to see what you guys do moving forward. And thank you again for coming on and sharing your journey with us. I look forward to staying in touch with you down the road.
Absolutely. Well, David, thanks for having me. Thanks for all your listeners, and appreciate what you're doing for commercial real estate. Thank you.
Hey there, before you go, I just want to thank you for listening to the show. We hope you enjoyed the episode today, and if you did, please take a moment to rate and review the show. Those ratings and reviews help us to attract the very best guests, and we want to bring you the best guests in the industry. Also, we're active on social media, so be sure to follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. There you can stay connected with us and up to date on all of our latest content. Lastly, don't forget to check out our website, theleadsponsor.com. We've got some free trainings and resources there that will help you grow as a leader and an investor. Again, thank you so much for supporting the show. We'll see you next week.